the rise of a king whose throne reached the earth and heavens long ago, in the lands where prophets once walked and miracles unfolded. A boy was born into the house of Prophet Dawood. From an early age he showed signs of deep wisdom, unmatched, understanding, and a heart that beat with a remembrance of God. His name was Sulaiman, and even as a child his eyes held the glow of someone destined for a divine mission. He was no ordinary child. His silence spoke with knowledge, and his speech carried meanings far beyond his age. While others played, he observed. While others argued, he judged. His manner reflected the spiritual maturity that had descended upon him as a gift from his Lord. Prophet Dawood, his father, was a king and prophet ruling justly with divine guidance. But he knew that the boy before him was destined to surpass even him in knowledge and power. It wasn't the throne that mattered to Dawood. It was the trust, the amana that came with it. And when the time came, he passed it to Sulaiman. The kingdom bowed to him, not because of fear, but because of the light that flowed through his justice, wisdom, and spiritual depth. Sulaiman's throne was not like those built with gold and guarded by men. It was upheld by the words of his Lord, and surrounded by an army not just of humans, but also of jinn, animals, and birds. The wind itself answered his command. Mountains remembered God with him. It was not through tyranny or magic, but through submission to the Creator that such miracles unfolded. This was the divine decree. A servant of God gifted with control over creation as a sign, not as a reward for power, but for trust. His court was unlike any other seen on earth. Seated on his throne, Prophet Sulaiman would watch his lines of humans, and jinns stood to receive orders, answer questions, or seek justice. Animals would gather nearby, and birds flew above in flocks, each holding their place in the divine system established under his rule. Every creature had a purpose, and every voice had meaning. One might have thought this was a tale of fantasy, but it was nothing short of divine reality recorded in the scrolls and remembered through the ages. One early morning, as the sun began to rise and the desert sands started to shimmer in golden light, Sulaiman ordered his army to march. It was not a campaign of conquest, but a journey of observation. He would often travel through the lands to witness the creation of God and to ensure his kingdom remained firm in justice. With him marched soldiers from every world, humans in ranks, jinn in formation, and birds soaring above in a pattern of divine coordination. It was a scene that made even the wind stand still for a moment to witness. The command was absolute, but never oppressive. The birds communicated messages, the jinn cleared paths, and humans marched in peace. Trees along the paths bent in respect, and the mountains whispered praises. Yet, despite such power, Sulaiman never forgot who he was, a servant of the Almighty. He reminded his people often, "What we hold is not ours. It is from Him, and to Him all returns." On this particular journey, they entered a valley surrounded by hills and flowering trees. The air was rich with fragrance, and the earth vibrant with life. But this land had its own inhabitants, small, nearly invisible to the human eye, but well organized and deeply aware. These were the ants, the silent caretakers of the earth, who lived in colonies below ground, building cities of tunnels with discipline and harmony. Among them was a wise ant, old in age but sharp in perception. She had seen storms, birds of prey, and heavy feet crush her kind before. But today she sensed something different. From the distant earth tremors, she realized a great army was approaching. But not just any army, this was the army of Prophet Sulaiman. Her senses confirmed it when she felt the harmonious pattern in the vibrations of the earth and heard a rhythm in the wind. Still, danger was danger. The ant, a leader among her kind, rushed to the entrance of her colony. Her voice, though tiny, was filled with urgency as she called out to her fellow ants. "O ants, enter your dwellings, lest Sulaiman and his hosts crush you while they perceive not." It was a call of both caution and understanding. She did not accuse Sulaiman of arrogance or ignorance. Rather, she acknowledged that harm might come unintentionally. Her wisdom lay in both her warning and her fairness. And at that very moment, Sulaiman, moving ahead with his army, heard her. Yes, he heard the voice of an ant. This was not through tricks or sorcery, but by the permission of the one who made speech, sound, and understanding possible. Sulaiman paused. He looked around, then smiled. Not a smile of arrogance, but a smile of recognition, mercy, and gratitude. That a small creature buried in the earth spoke such truth, and that he, a king with armies, was still being watched and reminded through the smallest of Allah's creation. He turned his gaze to the sky and softly said, "My Lord, enable me to be grateful for your favor which you have bestowed upon me and upon my parents, and do righteousness that pleases you, and admit me by your mercy into the ranks of your righteous servants." This was the essence of his greatness, not his command over jinn or the wind, not his majestic throne, nor his ability to understand the speech of birds and ants. It was this, that his heart remained in sujud, even while his crown rested on his head. His gratitude flowed deeper than rivers, and his awareness of Allah was constant. He saw the world not through the eyes of a king, but through the heart of a servant. The army moved slowly now, careful not to disturb the ground. Orders were given to shift their path slightly to avoid stepping on the ant dwellings. The earth smiled, and the winds carried the sound of Sulaiman's gratitude to the heavens. From this single incident, generations have drawn wisdom, that the smallest creature can carry the biggest lessons, that even the most powerful must stay aware of those who go unnoticed. That gratitude is not only for receiving miracles, but also for recognizing their weight and responsibility. Prophet Sulaiman's journey did not stop there. The road ahead would unfold even greater signs. There would be letters sent through birds to mighty queens. There would be encounters with thrones transported in the blink of an eye. And above all, there would be proofs that the authority of this world holds no value unless it bows before the authority of the unseen. But on that day, in that valley under the shade of the trees and the watchful eyes of a small ant, the entire cosmos witnessed a silent miracle. Not a mountain split, not a river turned to blood. Just an ant warning her people, and a prophet smiling in gratitude. And in that moment, truth triumphed quietly, humbly, and eternally. The journey of light, letters, and thrones as the army adjusted its path to protect the unseen dwellings of the ants. The valley grew quiet again. But something eternal had already taken place. A moment of divine recognition passed between the king and the smallest creature in his domain. The story of the ant would not remain confined to the dust of that valley. It would be preserved in sacred scripture to be recited in whispered awe by believers across time, and Prophet Sulaiman moved forward, not with pride, but with a renewed sense of humility, for every grain of sand and every whisper of wind testified to the one who held dominion over all dot. After leaving the valley, Sulaiman resumed his inspection of the kingdom. Each journey was not merely political or administrative, it was spiritual. He sought to understand the balance of creation, to witness how every creature fulfilled its decree. The birds above served not only as scouts, but as messengers between realms. Among them was a special bird, small in size, but great in service. It was the hoopoe, known for its sharp vision and strong loyalty. Its flight was elegant, its beak pointed like a pen that wrote messages across the sky. But one day, as Sulaiman stood among his ranks, inspecting the formation of birds, his gaze swept across the sky, and something was amiss. A formation was incomplete. His eye, trained in order and discipline, noticed instantly that the hoopoe was missing. "Why do I not see the hoopoe?" he asked, his voice calm but firm. "Or is he among the absent? Surely I will punish him severely or slay him unless he brings me a clear reason." The words were not cruel, but a reflection of Sulaiman's responsibility. In a kingdom where every creature had a role, absence without purpose could not be overlooked. But in his heart he waited not with vengeance, but with justice. Moments later the hoopoe returned. It circled above and landed near the throne, its feathers ruffled from long flight. But there was something in its eyes, urgency, excitement, and a whisper of revelation. The bird spoke. "I have learned something you do not know. I have come from Sheba with sure news." Sulaiman narrowed his eyes slightly, interested. The hoopoe continued. "Indeed, I found a woman ruling over them. She has been given everything, and she has a magnificent throne. But she and her people prostrate to the sun instead of Allah. Shaitan has made their deeds seem pleasing to them and turned them away from the path, so they do not receive guidance." There was silence in the court. The throne room, filled with voices of jinn and men, now held its breath. The king, whose power reached the heavens and earth, had been brought news, not from a man, not from a noble, but from a bird. Yet truth does not depend on the speaker. And the message shook Sulaiman's heart, not with fear, but with purpose. He turned to the bird and said, "We will see whether you have told the truth or you are among the liars. Go with this letter of mine and drop it to them. Then stay nearby and watch how they respond." The letter was short but divine in weight. It began with the name of the Most Merciful. In it Sulaiman wrote, "Do not exalt yourselves above me, but come to me in submission." And so the hoopoe flew wings steady, purpose clear. The journey to Sheba was long, but the wind was obedient, and the bird flew as a messenger of a prophet, bearing not threat but invitation. Sheba was a rich land, ruled by a queen whose wisdom was known throughout the region. Her name was Bilqis, and though her people worshipped the sun, she governed with intelligence and fairness. When she received the letter, she was taken aback. A foreign king, powerful enough to send a letter through a bird, had summoned her not to war, but to truth. Yet pride and responsibility weighed on her. She gathered her ministers and advisers, laying the letter before them. "O my people," she sighed, "a noble letter has been delivered to me. It is from Sulaiman. It begins in the name of Allah. the most gracious, the most merciful. Her counsel buzzed with reaction. Some urged war, others warned caution. But Bilqis was thoughtful. She chose neither arrogance nor fear. Instead, she sent a delegation with gifts, hoping to test the intentions of Sulaiman. For rulers in those days often masked their hunger for power behind the veil of religion. When the envoys arrived in Sulaiman's court, they brought treasures, gold, rare gems, fine cloth. But Sulaiman's eyes did not flicker. He looked past the glitter and spoke plainly. "Do you offer me wealth? What Allah has given me is far better than what He has given you. Go back to your people. We will come to them with armies they cannot withstand unless they submit." The messengers, stunned by the confidence and clarity, returned to Sheba with his words. Bilqis knew now, this was not a man seeking to expand a kingdom. This was a prophet inviting to a truth higher than Throne, and Sulaiman, knowing that she would eventually come, began to prepare not with swords, but with a test. He asked his assembly, "Who among you can bring me her throne before she comes to me in submission?" One of the jinn, powerful and swift, rose and said, "I will bring it to you before you rise from your place." But another, who had been given knowledge from the book, stood quietly and said, "I will bring it to you within the blink of an eye." And before the next breath was drawn, the magnificent throne of Bilqis stood before Prophet Sulaiman. Not a single guard had seen it leave. Not a single voice had announced its theft. It had been brought across nations and deserts, not by speed alone, but by divine command and knowledge. Sulaiman, seeing it before him, did not marvel for long. He immediately bowed his head and said, "This is from the bounty of my Lord, to test me whether I am grateful or ungrateful. And whoever is grateful, it is for his own benefit. And whoever denies, my Lord is free of need and generous." This was the essence of his rule. Not conquest, but submission. Not arrogance, but awe. Even the miracles served only to strengthen. His bond with the Creator Dot. When Bilqis arrived, she was welcomed with honor. But she saw something familiar and foreign. The throne before her looked like hers, but altered slightly. Sulaiman asked, "Is this your throne?" She replied, "It is as though it is." It was not trickery. It was insight. She understood the point. This was a world beyond ordinary rule, a world where power bowed before divine knowledge. Then Sulaiman invited her into his palace. As she approached, she saw a shining surface and lifted her garment, thinking it was water. But it was glass, smooth and clear, built over flowing water beneath. She stood stunned, not just by the palace, but by the reflection of truth in every detail. It was then that her heart opened fully. She turned and said, "My Lord, I have wronged myself, and I submit with Sulaiman to Allah, Lord of all the worlds." And thus a queen who once bowed to the sun, now prostrated to the light behind the sun. That day, the court of Sulaiman was silent once again, not because of shock, but because hearts were full. A journey that began with a bird ended with the awakening of a kingdom. Sulaiman had not forced her. He had invited her. And she had seen not just power, but truth. The same Lord who allowed Sulaiman to understand the ant had brought a queen to guidance through a throne, a letter, and a whisper of sincerity. And yet his journey continued. The jinn still worked under his command. The winds carried him across lands, Animals obeyed, and the world recognized a king who ruled with mercy and bowed only to the one beyond all thrones. But even Sulaiman knew that time would come. No power on earth could stop the decree written long before he was born. He had read it in the books of the wise. He had felt it in the stillness between miracles. And soon the final test would appear not in the form of a bird or a queen, but in the shadow of death itself, the silent witness and the hidden truth, the skies above the lands of profit. Sulaiman held the weight of purpose. Clouds moved only where they were told. Winds obeyed no master except the one whom the Creator had honored with knowledge and command. The jinn who once whispered chaos in the ears of kings now stood in disciplined lines, awaiting his orders. They built palaces and carved mountains, but never once did he lose sight of the fact that his dominion was a test, not a trophy. Sulaiman would sit in quiet reflection often, his face turned not toward the ornaments of his kingdom, but toward the heavens. He had seen what others only dreamt of. He had spoken to creatures from every world, and yet he never forgot the silence of the grave that awaited even the most honored prophet. He had witnessed queens surrender to truth, jinn bend to mercy, and ants teach humility. Still, he knew the earth was not a final resting place. One morning Sulaiman stood tall, leaning on his staff. The dawn broke gently over the hills as he watched his workers' men, birds, and jinn labor on a temple whose grandeur would humble all who laid eyes upon it. It was not the structure that mattered, but what it would symbolize, a house raised in gratitude to the Lord of all worlds. His gaze was fixed, yet his thoughts wandered through verses of truth and echoes of prayer. He had lived as a king, but now he began to feel the nearness of another command, one that could not be delayed nor defied. Without a warning, while still standing firm, life began to leave him, but no soul around him could sense it. The jinn continued working. The men followed their routine. None of them knew that the one they obeyed so readily had already crossed the threshold between this world and the next. He remained upright, leaning on his staff, his body still, his robe flowing with the breeze. Time passed. Hours turned into days. The creatures under his command toiled without rest, thinking he watched them. But the truth of his death was veiled. By the wisdom of the Most High Dot, it was not until a small creature, a tiny earth-dwelling worm, began to gnaw at the base of his staff that the illusion of strength began to break. Slowly, silently, without any grand event, the staff weakened. And finally it snapped. Prophet Sulaiman's body, which had remained upright all this time, fell gently to the ground. Only then did the jinn and men realize that their leader had passed away long ago. They were stunned, frozen, not by fear, but by the sudden unveiling of a truth they had not expected. The divine message became clear. If the jinn truly had knowledge of the unseen, they would not have continued in humiliating labor. And so, the secret of Sulaiman's passing became a sign not just for the workers, but for all who would come after. It was a declaration that no matter how vast one's power, how divine one's authority seems, all return to dust, and that even the hidden forces of the world have limits in the face of divine decree. The story of the worm, much like the story of the ant, echoed loudly through the silence of reflection. A small, insignificant creature, whose presence would usually go unnoticed, was the key to revealing a reality far greater than any illusion of power. This was not a humiliation for Sulaiman. It was a completion and honor of a different kind. To have died in service, to have left the world standing tall, and to have his departure hidden by the Lord himself until the moment of truth was revealed. The workers mourned. The jinn trembled. But those close to the divine path understood. The righteous knew that this was not a fall, but an ascent. His soul had reached where even the winds could not follow, where even the birds did not fly. His spirit was now in the presence of the one he had served with sincerity and love. The temple was completed, and it stood not only as a place of worship, but as a reminder that every pillar, every stone, had been placed by the will of Allah and under the shadow of a man who had known the weight of true authority. And yet, the story of Sulaiman did not fade with his body. His name remained in the tongues of the righteous, in the whispers of the wise, and in the ink of the preserved book. Generations later, his life would be recounted not for the magic falsely attributed to him by the misguided, but for the light of knowledge, the justice of rule, and the submission of a soul devoted to the unseen. The people remembered how he would ride the wind, not to impress, but to fulfill the duty of guidance. They remembered how he commanded the birds not to boast, but to seek information for the cause of truth. They remembered how he ruled over jinn, but never let arrogance touch his heart. They remembered how he bowed his head upon hearing the words of an ant, and how he praised the Lord when a queen entered the fold of truth. Even in his silence there was meaning. His staff had once been a symbol of strength, but it was the worm that reminded all of the reality that lies beyond appearances. The ant had reminded him of mercy. The bird had carried the message of faith, and the worm had unveiled the final chapter of his earthly presence. The scholars and sages, those who traced his legacy through reflection, often told their students, "Do not envy the power of Sulaiman. Envy instead his gratitude. Do not seek his throne, seek instead his dua. Enable me to be grateful for your favor. ... Single quotes. For what is a throne without humility? What is command without remembrance?" His life was not a fable, not a tale of kings and beasts. It was a living proof that, when a soul aligns with divine wisdom, the entire creation becomes part of its journey, not for domination, but for reflection. His ability to understand animals was not for spectacle, but to awaken humanity to the signs scattered across earth and sky. The ant's voice was still remembered, and many years later poets would write that it was not the army that made Sulaiman great, nor the miracles, nor the temple. It was that single moment when he smiled at the speech of a creature so small that most would crush it without a thought. That moment, recorded in the heavens, preserved in revelation, and recited in every age, became a symbol of the kind of awareness that only true servants possess. As centuries passed, his name was honored in the hearts of those who saw truth beyond the veil of titles. His prayers were memorized. His wisdom became a reference. And his kingdom, though long turned to dust, remained alive in the spirit of those who sought light in a world filled with shadows. From the valley of ants to the palace of Bilqis, from the wind that carried his throne to the worm that ended his worldly hold, every chapter of his story echoed a deeper truth, that all creation is a witness, that every voice matters, that power is tested through humility, and that those who walk the earth with awareness of the unseen are never truly gone. They become part of the timeless rhythm of divine narrative. They rise above history and enter into legacy, not built of stone or gold, but of submission, gratitude, and unwavering awareness of their Lord.